or it may be model disruption or a way that they're taking the product to market. At the end of the day, I think investors are really looking at trying to get the balance between two equations. What is the cost to acquire a customer, and what is the potential lifetime value of that customer? Because you know you're going to have churn in your customers, you're going to have that attrition. So you need to make sure you've got enough margin between that cost and that lifetime value to absorb that and properly run the business. So those are just some of the things that I think investors are typically looking for. In terms of Launch Tennessee, we're really, what we're trying to do is make Tennessee the #1 place in the Southeast for entrepreneurs to start and grow a business. And so we work on capital formation that I spoke about, not only in terms of getting more angel investors around the state, but also connecting with regional and national venture capital groups and getting them interested in and aware of our opportunities here in Tennessee. We also help entrepreneurs try to access funding, like with the National Science Foundation and other SBIR grants. So we have a micro commercialization director, has been down that path before. He works with entrepreneurs every day. And we also have a national consultant who spends some time with us in Tennessee trying to help us get more of those federal funds. So capital formation is huge. We also have an accelerator network that's unlike any across the country. So we have 9 accelerators across the state, including the Biz Foundry here in Cookeville. And we're pushing our accelerators to have, to differentiate. We don't need 9 accelerators doing the same kind of thing. So what are the kind of focus areas that make sense for your area? So here, Jeff Brown and his team have done a fantastic job of putting together code academies. And we're really excited to see how that plays out in their first code camp this summer in Chattanooga, where I live. We have the smartest smart grid, and we have the fastest internet in the country. So we're running the Gig Tank, which is a program around applications that could take advantage of our bandwidth. From there to medical devices in Memphis to healthcare IT in Nashville, we've got lots of different strengths across the state, and we're really trying to draw on that. So we can draw in entrepreneurs in particular industries. We can support them with mentors who have industry experience, and we can bring in investors who are particularly interested in those areas. The other really aspects of Launch Tennessee are commercialization. We work with institutions like Oak Ridge National Lab and Dr. Roberto on the good work that they're doing, and we work closely with them. And really in that role, we're more of a connector. So we started a program last spring called Venture Match, which we do about every month across the state, and we'll invite technologists who've invented ideas and technologies within our research institutions to pitch those ideas to rooms full of entrepreneurs and investors. And really, in that case, you're just trying to make the opportunity for connections to happen and then commercialization opportunities that might arise from that. And finally, we see ourselves as the marketing arm for entrepreneurship across the state. So that's part of our outreach to investors, to media. We started a conference last June called Southland, which we want to make the premier early stage tech conference, really, certainly in the Southeast, but really across the country. And we've got our second conference coming up this June, and we've secured speakers like Dave Marcus, who's CEO of PayPal, and Phil Libben, who's CEO of Evernote, and Vice President Gore, and we're going to have investors from around the country there. So we're really trying to do everything we can to shine a light on Tennessee and on entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial opportunities here.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Let me now go to Dr. Canfield. Steve, would you briefly describe Tennessee Tech's I&E programs and how TTU's education, research, and outreach roles contribute to them? And what has helped you to take your discoveries further toward commercialization?
Okay, thank you. Well, so I'll start with two questions. Let me first address Tennessee Tech. I love Tennessee Tech. I'm a proud supporter here. And Tennessee Tech has a long history of contributions to these areas of innovation and entrepreneurship. I'll say quickly a few words about each at first. When I think technical innovations or innovations on the technical side, there's a variety of significant contributions in areas such as aerospace, work that researchers have done with NASA, our defense program through the Navy and the Air Force, as well as infrastructure developments regionally and nationally, and also focus on water quality and use. So many significant technical innovations that fall out. When we look at entrepreneurship, our university is well recognized for being a leader and a contributor there. Many of these efforts led out of the College of Business. For example, really for the last 20 years, they've offered specific training in entrepreneurship classes that would be available locally, in person, as well as online, publications in this scholarly work. And they've been recognized in a number of awards for their entrepreneurship education nationally and locally. Now, let me fast forward to our current state. I'm going to echo some of the words that Charlie said. It's a time when I look at what is available for entrepreneurship. It's a brand new time. If I think about my engineering students, the tools that they have that are ready to use are just amazing. These tools were not available at all when I was a student, or whenever any of you guys were students. And they can solve problems on the go. They can solve problems in many areas. At the same time, when we look at innovation, it's critical to our national success. So our current state is one that builds on our historical state, but says the way we've been doing things can't go on. Previously, you know, we've looked at, well, technical innovations are going to occur over here. Market
Differentiated.
Well, a couple issues first. I run an interdisciplinary center where all the engineers, technologists, designers, and business folks kind of crash together to do the D school, B school, and E school approach to it. And when they asked me to take the position, the first thing I said was, as long as you don't ask me to define innovation. I'm not joking. I went to 3 meetings where all the designers defined it one way, and all the engineers defined it another way, and all the business people defined it another. So I'm not going to do that, because that will only destroy collaboration. What I will say is that you can kind of figure it out. Innovation has to do with creating something unique and then realizing it. So you have to not only create it, but then people have to use it. Entrepreneurship, if we use the very strict definition, it's somebody that's creating a business around it, either outside of a company or inside of a company. So having said that, you can be an innovator without being an entrepreneur, and you can be an entrepreneur, although it might not be very interesting, without being an innovator. Having said that, let's talk a little bit about whether you can teach it from both of those angles. If we were talking to a bunch of students 30 years ago, which is when I was in school, and you said, who wants to be an entrepreneur? Who wants to create something? You would have had maybe 5 or 10% raise their hands, and almost invariably, their parents would have been entrepreneurs. If you ask people now, about 80% of them will raise their hands. So culture has a major impact on people wanting to do their own things, particularly the way our economy is now, and I think that was alluded to in our address. And there are many issues that are associated with this. Who are our role models? What do you want to do? How do you see success? 30 years ago, it would have been a major corporation. It would have been IBM or something like that. Now it's a Bill Gates or an Ellison or, you know, a Steve Jobs or something like that. And everybody has, I don't know about Tennessee Tech, but at RIT, where I'm a professor, we have a few 26, 27-year-olds that have made $100 million, $500 million companies. Now, it's not very often, it's rare, but it's very good. And it really jazzes the students up. Now, what can we do about creating? Now, let's talk about what you can't do first. To be an entrepreneur, and this isn't necessarily, this is an entrepreneur and an innovator, you can't change somebody's perception of risk. If somebody isn't comfortable with risk, and there are people that are just like that, who are brilliant folks, they're going to work for academic institutions and the government, all right? And they're going to be brilliant, and they're going to do very well. But they are not going to be comfortable risking a lot of it, even if it's moderated risk. People who can't get things done, who are more thinkers, all right? They're probably not ever going to be entrepreneurs in the purest sense, because they can't do that. People that can't play well with folks. The traditional notion of an entrepreneur that can't work well with people, that is just a lone individual, well, you can't ever have a scalable company if you're like that. Okay, a high potential idea requires a high potential team. So you can't teach any of that. What can you teach? You can teach the process. You can teach people how to look at creating things. Now, for an innovator, we need creativity. We need to have them look outside the boxes. You know, I have a 4-year-old son. He's the most creative person in the world. And I don't want him ever to stop that, but I don't want him to jump out the window and think he can fly, because he cannot. So you have to balance that. As far as entrepreneurs, you have to teach them it's balanced risk. Okay, the risk is, you're not going to Vegas. Okay, what you do is you look at risk return. There was a gentleman that came in and spoke in one of my classes a long time ago. I won't tell you his name, but he's the largest commercial real estate owner in the United States, okay? And he basically sat down in front of these groups and said, I started buying houses to rent out when I was in college. And I looked at it with what had a big upside and a low downside, and that was what determined what I got in. And he was, again, very, very successful. As I kind of look forward on other things we teach, everything that you said, we try to teach them. The question is how. And our speaker today really talked about, can you teach it or can you learn it? The answer is learn. And I think everything we know talks about experiential education. And I'm a big fan of crashing together engineers, business, and designers together and seeing what happens. And they all have different views of the world. And as soon as we can let them realize that it's not what the designer thinks, it's not what the business person thinks, it's not about the engineer thinks or the technologist, it's how they view it together, because that's what works, because you need all three. And we run a very successful student incubator program where we did about 100 multidisciplinary teams last year. And we focus on things like Lean Launchpad and the things. And actually, if I got my notification right, we were very fortunate, and we're going to be one of the I-Core nodes that come up. So we're really pleased with that. But what we try to do with our students, and then I'm just going to kind of wind this down, is our goal, since we work primarily with undergrad, only 4% of the groups I work with have the potential to be high potential companies and are passed on to our technology incubator. The rest is learning. The learning to do the process on a repeated basis. And I have 3 students that were hired at different years by Microsoft who are undergraduate software engineers and computer scientists. They were hired in MBA jobs, okay? And they don't have MBAs because they had created these things. They had created 10-person teams that began to sell products. They realized at the end that it would never be big enough for them to be happy, but they actually did that and they learned. And that's what we're looking for. It's to teach them the process and to teach everyone to work together, and that it's not how you design things and the human-centered approach.